Welcome back to The Contender. I'm Congresswoman Erin Houchin, and today we're talking about something that's becoming increasingly important on college campuses across America: freedom of association. The First Amendment protects our right to freely associate, but we've seen colleges and universities punish students simply because they belong to lawful organizations like fraternities and sororities. That's why I introduced the Freedom of Association in Higher Education Act, legislation that recently passed the House Education and Workforce Committee. Joining me today is Jud Horras, President and CEO of the North American Interfraternity Conference. Jud has spent years advocating for students and working with fraternity communities across the country. Jud, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself before we go into your role at the council, or at the conference. Where did you go to school? Were you in a fraternity? And what impact, obviously, did that have on your future?
Yeah, I went to Iowa State University, proud Cyclone. I joined Beta Theta Pi as a part of that experience. I loved it so much that I actually started working for the national organization right out of college. Did that for about 20 years and then moved over from working with one fraternity. Now I advocate for all fraternities in North America.
That's really
and it's just a huge honor because it's done so much for me, and I love what it does for young men.
Why is it important that there is a person that has your job working at the federal level on behalf of fraternities and sororities across the country? Tell me about your role at the Interfraternity Conference.
Well, I think in the end, I'm one of the chief advocates for young men in fraternities. And that's a real honor because what it's doing for young men, especially today with mental health issues, young men deciding to go to college, stay in college, the value that fraternities providing to young men today is far greater than it was for me in the 90s. And that's what all the research says. So to get to advocate at this level for their experience and help protect it is something special.
So talk to us about the Freedom of Association in Higher Education Act.
Yeah.
For those at home, our listeners that are not familiar with what the bill does, why did you bring that to the forefront? I'm certainly happy to be a champion for that, but why did you bring it to the forefront and tell us about that bill?
Well, it all really started in 2016. Harvard University decided in its infinite wisdom that belonging to a single-sex organization for their students in their own private time off of Harvard private property, so they're on their own property away from Harvard, that still was something that they had to terminate and abolish. So they were trying to control young men from deciding to join all-male glee club or all-male fraternity clubs, and same for women. And
why were they trying to do that?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, they gave reasons originally for sexual misconduct. Those all fell apart, that these institutions weren't causing the problems once we really dug into the info. But it was stated multiple times they were trying to re-engineer society, and this was one of the ways of doing that. And ultimately, they admitted through the process that they were trying to take out all male clubs and that the all women's clubs were just collateral damage. So completely disagree with what their premise was. We ultimately took them to court, fought, and won that particular case. And then we started working on legislation, not just for fraternities and sororities, but the right for young men and women on college campuses to decide what they want to belong to. It's in their best interest and agency to be in control of their lives. And as long as they're following the rules and expectations of the school, then they should be able to do what they want to do on their own time.
And I don't want to just rip the Band-Aid right off on this issue, but I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you fair warning that I'm going to go in with this next question because it's on my mind. Is any of this, and it may not be your view that it is, but I do hold the view that some of this is not wanting to have single-sex organizations at all on these campuses to stop the differentiation between the sexes. We've seen this in sports and other things where we have men and women's sports, men and women's spaces. Is this collateral damage from that movement?
I think Harvard, when they talked about in public, that's what they were going for ultimately. But here's the problem with that logic. young men today have greater health issues in suicide, anxiety, and depression. They're entering higher education at a lower rate now than ever before, and they need a place when they arrive on a college campus that they can find their own brotherhood, a place for them to find a home within the larger campus environment. And the research shows over and over again that if you join a fraternity, you have lower anxiety and depression. If you join a fraternity, you're more likely to graduate. If you join a fraternity as a first-generation student, it does more for that student than it does for any other student simply by joining a fraternity. And so what it did for me is what it should be doing for kids at Harvard and what it should be doing nationwide. And ultimately, this comes down to schools should not be engineering how we think about the world. They should be engineering how students open up and start to question the world and how they want to associate with
And
that.
experience it.
And experience it. And so while this isn't just about Harvard anymore, this was the kind of the first step into freedom of association. And it plays out on all kinds of different campuses in different ways.
So when I was in college, I had a very similar experience to wanting to make the campus smaller. Yeah. I went to, as we see, Indiana University. We can just note the championship helmet signed by Kurt Signetti in the background of our film. But I went to IU. I'm a proud graduate and alumni of Indiana University, and I was a Phi Mu at IU. And I wanted to join a sorority because of that, that need. The campus is so large at IU. One of my first classes was a biology class where there were 350 students in the classroom. It's hard to take a campus that size from a small town girl from southern Indiana and put me into this situation where there's just so many different people and not knowing very many on campus to make it smaller and to build those friendships and those relationships. Another issue is to provide leadership opportunities. And there are skills that young men and women are able to develop as part of the fraternity and sorority system, being presidents of their fraternity. I was on the executive board for our sorority. I did member development. So we had led a pledge class, and it was a great experience. So what are some other things and benefits that we'll be missing out if this trend across the country continues?
Well, I'm going to talk as a dad. I have a daughter at Iowa State. She's going into her third year, and she's completely different after 2 years in college, and different in a good way. She's confident, she's mature, she's more resilient, and you can directly see it's a result of her experience in her sorority. And so to me, that isn't just about what happens in Ames, Iowa, at Iowa State for my daughter. It's really about helping young men and women who are struggling with these issues because of how they're growing up in this generation. Building them a platform for confidence and resiliency is something that's going to carry forward after college. And so I also say that fraternities aren't for everyone, but I do believe every young man needs a brotherhood in some way. And if you're not in college, I understand that the fraternity may not be for you, but maybe it's the brotherhood you find at the local trade association. Maybe it's the brotherhood you find in a church. We are trying to replicate that on college campuses and help literally hundreds of thousands of men do that. And that type of experience carries forward after college.
Why should average Americans who weren't in Greek life care about this bill and the work that you're doing at the Interfraternity Council or conference? Why should Americans who are not part of Greek life care about that?
Well, we're really in the business of helping young men grow up and mature and become more confident and resilient. And I think everyone should be in that business, especially if you're a parent. But more specifically, if you think about the concept of freedom of association as we're nearing the 250th anniversary of our country, it's about taking agency of your life and taking agency of your community and projecting that in a way that you feel in charge, and it's not being told what to do by an outsider, but something you choose and something you belong to. And that moment of intimate connection that you find in a fraternity or in a church group, that should not be a place where the government tries to get involved or schools try to get involved. We should regulate conduct on a college campus or off a college campus. We think that you should follow rules and expectations. But ultimately, the ability to associate is so personal in your development, we shouldn't take that away.
So the bill says we won't allow colleges and universities to prohibit these types of organizations, and that is something that has been a real threat, not just at Harvard, but some other universities across the country. We've seen it in Michigan. I think there was a slight bubble up at Indiana University. How common is this problem, and is it a growing problem? How urgent is this bill?
Well, I always tell people if you're going to work with college students, especially college men, you're going to have issues that you got to hold them accountable to. That's a part of growing up and maturing, and that's an experience we want to have. But when these communities are, because of one or two groups get in trouble for hazing, they should be held accountable. But when they shut down the entire system, it's actually counterproductive. Because what about the guys who are following the rules, or the women in a sorority who are following the rules? To have them impacted because it's a system-wide action, it demotivates them from following expectation because what's in it for me to do the right thing? And so while we did have a concern in Indiana, it got fixed quickly, and I appreciated the administration doing that. They actually have really good leadership there. This bill would help prevent that across the rest of the country. I think that's important too. It's about due process and fairness.
Yeah, and when we are talking about misconduct, there are instances of misconduct at some of these universities at the fraternity and the sorority level, and you're right, they should absolutely be held accountable. How does this bill protect students from some of that behavior while still allowing for the universities to address those issues, but remain open with the institutions and the organizations that don't violate the laws?
Well, first of all, everyone agrees we got to address hazing on college campuses. And that's why you helped us get a bill across the first federal legislation in the last Congress. And we have also worked at over 12 states to strengthen local criminal laws around hazing. It's important to address that. But equally, it's important that the students who don't participate in that behavior, that they do not be labeled as all of the problem as well. So I always say you need to do accountability with a scalpel. You need to work and address it with particular students and particular organizations. But when people try to do it with a chainsaw, it's completely unfair, and it's something that we have to stop, equally important as addressing hazing. It's about due process and fairness.
I'm going to go back to just some of the benefits of being part of these groups. We are in an increasingly online world. People are going to, I'd say some of these younger or maybe 20-something men are going to their parents' basements and playing video games, and that's their social interaction.
Yeah.
But being in a fraternity or sorority does force you to cohabitate with a group of men or women in a very intimate setting, right? When I was at FIMU at IU, we slept in a cold dorm.
Yep.
You could choose the cold dorm or the warm dorm.
Yep.
I thought the warm dorm sounded like the flu, so I chose the cold dorm. But you're also having meals together. You are having social activities together, and it's someone that is outside your family that becomes sort of your family away from home.
Right.
How important is that interaction as we become increasingly isolated, I would say, with greater and greater access to the digital world?
Well, I went to school in the 90s, and it was important to me then. But now, when my son, who is a senior in high school, he plays a lot of video games, but he also is involved in theater and performing arts, and he has his friends there. So I see it personally as a father at that age. What's so critical about what fraternities are doing right now is they are grabbing them from the digital world, which is video games or YouTube or online. And the research is actually showing it's for the first time in many of their lives, they're actually learning how to look eyeball to eyeball with each other and live in an environment where they don't get along. and how do I deal with conflict? And that is actually a skill that is critical at the age when I was in college, but for them, it's even more important to kind of...
And not dealing with conflict behind a screen.
That's exactly
but
it.
Conflict face to face.
Because when you're face to face, you do it in a way that is more appropriate and more measured. When you're doing it online, you're often able to do things that you probably shouldn't do, and it's not productive. And so I think we're teaching them how to collaborate. And that's why actually they just had a study come out, fraternities out of the North Carolina University showed that we're better at peer accountability than students who don't join fraternities, because they're actually learning it in college in a way that's, holding each other accountable. Why didn't you clean the bathroom? Why didn't you pay your dues? Why did you act like that on Friday night? That's against our rules and expectations. All of that's critical to their formation.
Fraternities and sororities also contribute a great deal to community service efforts and philanthropic efforts. I know I was part of IU Dance Marathon when I was at IU. I think I was up for 48 hours straight. And then I finally went back and went to sleep, and I may have slept for 48 hours straight after that. It's all a blur. But we raised money for, I believe it was the Children's Miracle Network. And that is a huge event that the fraternities and sororities participate in, or used to be at IU. What are some of the other philanthropic organizations that fraternities and sororities support? How much do you think they contribute in community service and also dollars toward philanthropic efforts?
Yeah, I'll give you an example at Purdue. I know it's maybe not for the IU folks something you want to hear, but I was involved with a fraternity that was doing a service project in Indianapolis, doing some work in the inner city that needed some help with some people that for Habitat for Humanity. So they raise dollars, but they also give time, and I think it gives them experiences to get in the community and get involved. And again, that's critical to their learning and development. So whether it's the Little Phi, bike race that they do in Bloomington, which is actually famous in our business, like fraternities and sororities everywhere admire what they do there, to what's happening at Hanover College. They're getting engaged in their community in a way that kind of gets them out of their comfort zone and doing service and raising money for things that, for the first time in their life, that isn't something that maybe they had to do in high school, but something they're choosing to do as a part of the fraternity.
And certainly individuals can engage in some of these activities, but it is meaningful to have so many young men or young women willing to step up and support those organizations, which I'm sure that they appreciate too. A group of supporters, of volunteers that they can count on is meaningful in a community impact perspective.
Absolutely.
We've talked a little bit about this, Jud, but what role do organizations play just in building leadership? Well,
I think I go back to, I know that I've said it before, is right now these organizations are giving young men the opportunity to build confidence. They're given assignments as chapter officers, or they're given assignments in projects and fraternities, and they're learning how to navigate, being resilient, getting the project done, working with a group of guys that sometimes do or don't want to help them, navigating and influencing them in that way. They're learning how to hold each other accountable to the expectations of membership. And lots of times that's the first time they've had to do that in kind of an interpersonal way. They're doing it in college. So all of these skills are helping them lead and navigate how to build coalitions, how to influence each other, how to hold someone accountable, how to be compassionate with people's issues in their life. I can't think of a better way to kind of get that going and learn it in college, because you're going to need it the rest of your life.
For sure, and I certainly have found that it's paid dividends for me and my leadership experiences, having had that, played those roles in college. What do you tell prospective freshmen going into this upcoming college season and their parents about Greek life, and what would you say to them if they were a little nervous about it, or had any kind of apprehension? What advice would you give to someone considering Greek life in this upcoming college experience?
I always think that young men need to take the time to really get to know the members before they decide if that's what they want to do. That they shouldn't just rush into it and just join within a day or two of meeting them. Take your time. You should be reflecting on, what do you want if you join a fraternity? What can it give you? And what can you give it? And through that process of understanding that, then go meet the guys. Do you feel comfortable with them? Is this someone you'd want to bring home to your family? Is this someone that later on down in life you would want to have stand with you at your wedding? Are these the type of guys that you can connect with and bond? That doesn't just happen instantly in the first time interaction. I always encourage people to know what they want, to seek it out, and then take the time to make the right decision.
And if there is a concern that's raised during the rush period,
Yep.
What should a prospective Greek student do if they are in a situation where they feel uncomfortable?
Well, if you feel uncomfortable, it should be immediately reported to the national organization and to the school. We have expectations of standards, and holding people accountable to those is critical, because if you don't see accountability, then you assume it's okay. And so many times, I think just saying, I don't feel comfortable is enough, right? And we've got to be there, and we try to respond as quickly as possible in these incidents to figure out what did happen, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again in the future. And there's a whole process of accountability that starts with reporting it.
I was proud to be a champion for the anti-hazing legislation that we got through the House of Representatives. I will continue to be a champion for standing up against hazing, and also just protecting the right for free association on these campuses. It is so important for the next generation to find these outlets, and in a way that makes them feel most comfortable. My last question for my guests, if you've watched the podcast, I hope you've had some time to think about this, is, as you know, the podcast is called The Contender. That has originated from a communion meditation that my husband wrote when my kids were young, to contend for the faith. And we used to have family meetings. My kids are older now, so they don't really want to do that anymore. They want to go hang out with their friends. They have their own things going on. But when they were very little, we'd have family meetings to kind of regroup before the week started. And he tells them about contending for the faith, and that they should contend for everything that they want to achieve. Every day you should go out and go after it. And so he puts this word on the back door, contend. And then my oldest daughter, a few days later, puts work hard. And then my middle daughter says have fun. So our family motto is contend, work hard, have fun. A little input from all of us. So the question would be, who is a contender that has set an example for you in your life on how to live in a way that is fighting for things that are important, working very hard at the objective, but having a fun experience while you're engaged?
There's no question, my older brother. He is an incredible dad. He's an incredible husband. He's always been there when I've had issues in life, and I feel like as a little brother I've had more than he has. And that type of firm relationship, and kind of his ability to demonstrate and role model what that looks like, is really important. I'm going to be on the lake with him this weekend with his family. He's very special to me. Without a doubt, he has been my role model as what's really important, which is family. I love him dearly. And I also want to say this, thank you. You know, these legislations, these bills don't happen without champions. And I don't know if your constituents understand just how important you've been, not only for the folks in Indiana, but for a lot of college students. We're talking hundreds of thousands of young men and women. They are seeing you champion for them, and that gives them hope. That gives them encouragement. And a lot of times that's all college students need, is they just need someone to believe in, and you've done that for them.
Wow, that's quite a compliment, Jud. Thank you so much. Thanks for partnering with us on this. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for being our guest on The Contender. I hope you have a great 4th of July weekend, celebrating with your brother and his family. How lovely. that you shared the story of him and what he's meant to you, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you.
Jud, thank you for joining us and for the work that you're doing to protect students' constitutional rights and to improve our campus communities. To all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode. Don't forget to subscribe, share the podcast, and stay inspired to contend, work hard, and have fun. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.